We'll call it 10 seconds.
Wherever you are, make it Truth Frequency Radio.
This is the American Forces Vietnam Network.
Good morning, TFR.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. What's wrong with you? By thinking, you're thinking, out on two.
Good morning, True Frequency Radio. My name is Josh Corey. You're listening to the Ironworks. I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Walter Johnson. Walter,
Good morning, good morning, good morning, Josh. How are you, sir?
I'm better than I deserve. What's that Jimmy Jean says? Can't get no better.
That's it. It can't get no better. Today, we will show that it can't get no better. My goodness, do we have some exciting news. We will get to it. Can't wait to unleash it on you guys. Good morning to everyone out there, or good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are across the plane. I know we have some friends over there in the pond who are listening. Adam, good morning over there. I know you're excited for this news to unleash on the public this morning. My goodness, when you showed us the video yesterday and we got in touch with these guys yesterday, and I could hardly sleep getting ready for the show. So we are excited. We are this is it. I mean, this is proof. You guys have been waiting for it in the flat earth community. Pearheads have been waiting for it. Man, I'm just excited. I'm going to shut up for a second before I just start rambling.
It is pretty huge. It's yeah, it's totally had my mind spinning for the last 12 hours. Completely rocked back on my heels. I'm really excited. Let's see, just a couple of things. So here's something interesting. On this day in 1967, I wanted to get this out of the way real quick. Dr. James Bedford becomes the first person to be cryonically preserved with the intent of future resuscitation and remains preserved at the Alcor Life Extension Foundation. Wherever in the world that is, I'd be curious to find out. But apparently he was just the first of many people to become frozen with the attempts to eventually they'll be thawed out and brought back to life, which I don't know, maybe something about the science of the 60s that made them think that was a good idea.
Hey man, that got me so hearing all that stuff as a kid growing up got me so excited that I started trying to do experiments like that. I know this is going to sound so insane. A buddy of mine and I would catch a housefly, throw it in the freezer, and let it freeze.
My kid does that.
Then we would take it out, set it close to the fire, not next, not close enough to burn, but close enough to the eye of the fire on the stove to warm back up and watch it fly away. We were mad scientists. We were defying death itself.
That's awesome. Well, there's a few other things I've noticed. Apparently, on this day in history, there seems to have been a lot of rulers that have been crowned on the 12th of January, which I thought was really interesting. And then just personally, I was kind of a Howard Stern fan growing up back in the day. And I think today is his birthday. So happy birthday, Howard Stern.
Of course, he's a Capricorn. I should have known.
But really, that's everything I've got because I just want to jump right into this. We've only got 2 hours here this morning, and it's really not even going to be enough time to just barely scratch the surface. Um, so here's the setup. The biggest problem with presenting this information here on TFR is this is, of course, audio. So much of this proof is visual that it's going to impede just a little bit. But we'll be posting links. We'll have links to pictures and videos, and you'll be able to see this for yourself. But this is going to be just a really good primer. And I'm going to let these gentlemen give you an idea of kind of how they got this. I tell you what, the things that they have done with just an accidental video have been absolutely amazing. So I think before much further ado, I'm just going to play a little bit of music because I know that this one really applies. So really this morning, we're just going to jump right in. We got 3 guys with us this morning. Walt and I are joined this morning by Anthony Riley, Nathan Oakley, and Shane Cook. They have been analyzing one of Anthony's videos. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to butcher it, and it's going to be much more succinct if I let these gentlemen do it. And
Let them tell the tale, right?
Shut the fuck up and let them take it. Welcome to Ironworks.
Hey, Josh.
Good morning,
hey,
Dave.
Walt. How you doing? Good to have us. Nice to be here.
Thanks so much for joining us. This is super exciting. I think there's a lot of people in chat that will be really interested in what you guys have discovered. And really about 90% of the hosts here on TFR have all fallen off the ball. So I think even the hosts will be excited about this. So gentlemen, I'm just going to let you take it away, and I will try to shut up and not interrupt.
Let's introduce them individually so everybody can kind of identify who is who. Nathan Oakley, if you don't mind, go ahead and say a little bit about yourself and tell everybody kind of what got you to this point.
Well, just because we've only got a couple of hours, I'll keep the bit about me to an absolute minimum because it's
Right.
more important that we talk about what's what. So the bit that involves me is the debate side. So I've been running for the last few months a debate show. And on that debate show, I've invited all and sundry to come on and express their views on the shape of the Earth. And one of those participants was the other panel member who you'll get to speak to in just a second, Anthony Riley, who took a video of the Isle of Man. Now, I'm going to say that in quotes, the Isle of Man, because it's not. It's the Isle of Man, an island, and that's only been figured out after a huge amount of dissection by us and what we call ballers, the opposition, the people who disagree with what we're presenting. But in essence, Anthony's put the information out, and then we've scrutinised it together for a very long period of time. And literally in the last, 2-3 days, we discovered what I've been describing as a diamond, and this was discovered by Shane, who's also on the panel, and Shane's been doing the compositing, so actually taking this video and turning it into a picture that you can analyse. You can change the contrast levels on it, you can pull out details of it, but this picture in essence is of the Isle of Man with Ireland in the background. And the clincher 2 or 3 days ago was that we found a second lighthouse in this footage, and this lighthouse is 51 miles away and about 10 meters to 15 meters off the shoreline. I mean, it's ridiculously low, and it actually even sits under this teeny tiny band of refraction so that it can gleam like a diamond, proving that the Earth is flat. But in essence, my part was just to offer a platform for guys like Shane and Anthony to actually come and present this data and have it challenged in order to prove that the Earth is flat. So that's my little bit. Maybe Anthony will tell you a bit about the actual the video, which eventually got turned into a picture.
Well, it all started for me in the end of October. Myself and my partner, we went away for a short week away, and it was just somewhere to get, release steam and just get rid of anxieties and just relax. It was peaceful and quiet. And we looked and found somewhere that was dog friendly because we needed to take the dogs with us, and the dogs wanted to go somewhere where there was a beach and some water and rocks and stuff for dogs to do on the beach and stuff. But in the back of my head, I had a little flat earth proof that I wanted to try and test. And my intention was to go up there and see if I could see Blackpool Tower. That was 50 miles away. And that was my goal for going there. I was going there specifically to see if I could see Blackpool Tower at night time. Now, when we got there, on this particular day, I woke up and the weather was crystal clear, really, really clear. And you get clear days, but this was like unbelievably clear. It was crystal clear. There was so little smog or moisture or humidity. It was just clear. So I grabs the P900, the weapon of choice, took a couple of batteries with me and my SD card, gets me tripod, goes onto this mound, and it was like a hill. I don't want to call it like a mountain because that's exaggerating how big it actually isn't. It was just an elevation point, and it was just a case of, right, I can't see Blackpool because to my south, this is all in Whitehaven, St. Bees, Whitehaven, by the way. It's in the Lake District. It's coastal, and I'm in a cove, and my line of sight is looking south toward if I look due, like one side of me is south, and then the other side of me is looking almost up towards Scotland. Not quite as far as Scotland, but nonetheless, it's just on the fringes of Scotland. But to my south, I've got Blackpool, and that's what I was really looking for. Gets on top of this little mound, looks down south, and it's murky over Blackpool. I can see the local weather in Blackpool. It was misty and muggy, and it wasn't as good as visibility as what I'm presented with right in front of me, which was the Isle of Man. So somewhat disheartened and disappointed. I put my tripod up anyway, and I thought, well, what I'll do is I'll just pan across the horizon and just record what I can see, just for my own austerity's sake for later on. Like, it was just for me. So I'm at the top of this mound, and I'm doing the touristy thing. I'm looking around, and I'm zooming in on dogs playing on the beach and all that kind of stuff, which is brilliant because it adds to the sincerity of the video itself. But once I'd finished on the beach and I moved around to the peninsula of land that I could see, which was the edge of the like St. Bees Head, and then I'm onto the horizon, and I'm panning across the horizon, and I know where I am geographically. You know, I'm clued in, so I knew what to expect to see. And as I pan across, I see this little bit of like, it's like floating land, and it looked like it was some kind of, I don't want to use the word hologram, but it looked like it was something that wasn't meant to be there, both from a geographic point of view, but also from a, hang on, that doesn't even look real. That looks like it looks like it's a manifestation of some kind. So I'm looking at it through the camera, and I'm trying to zoom in as much as I can. The camera can't really see it very well because it's really far away, so it won't focus on it. It's messing around. The camera's self-focusing, and I'm looking at it. I'm thinking, where on earth is that? And I thought, it's not Scotland. I don't think I've got enough line of sight to see Scotland. But there's Isle of Man to my left, and I'm looking in the gulf between the two of them, which should be just sea. And I'm looking and I'm thinking, that's got to be Ireland. And I'm looking and I'm thinking, hang on a minute, that wasn't on the cards. I wasn't expecting to see that. So I thought, I'm going to record it anyway, but I'm going to go straight back to the little caravan that we're stopping in, get on Google, check it, check my bearing line of sight, and see what else it could be, because I know my geography. I know what should and shouldn't be there, but I wasn't quite sure on the exact bearing. And in relation to the Isle of Man, which I was expecting to see, I was it was, for me, it was off kilter. It was like, hang on, Isle of Man stops around about there. What is this? Now, when I'm looking at this land, this thing that's on the horizon, it's not sat on the horizon the way you'd expect to see land in the background, because you could see the sky was reflecting underneath it. So it was like hovering above the horizon. And the best way to describe it is like, you know, in the winter when you wake up and you've got condensation on the inside of your window and you want to see what the weather's doing outside, so you get the back of your hand and you make a little hole and you look through the condensation because it's now clear. It was just like the atmosphere was the condensation on the window, and I'm looking through a small porthole and I'm looking through the atmosphere and I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, what on earth is that? So the camera's having moments where it's not focusing on stuff. I can tell that this is really far away, and logic and reason is telling me that must be Isle of Man. But logic and reason isn't the evidence standard that a flat earther will accept. Logic and reason may indicate the truth, but it isn't the proof of truth. So obviously I gets back down to the caravan, has a quick look, and checks my bearings. Sure enough, it appears to be Ireland. So it looks like I'm seeing Isle of Man crystal clear in front of me, but I've got this floaty land that's on the horizon, and I'm not sure absolutely that this is Ireland, but it certainly seems that way. But I didn't have my main PC with me. So what I thought, well, I'll get as much footage as I can now, and when I get home after holiday, I'll put it all together and make a video, and I'll put it out there and see what happens. And you'll find the video on, it's on my YouTube channel. It's called Sleeping Warrior. So I'll plug that a few times just so you can find it. And it's in there, St. Bees to Isle of Man, what's this land? And you'll find the video. But in the background, Nathan's got his debate channel going. And I said to Nathan, hey, I think I might have some Isle of Man footage here that's got Ireland in the background. I'm not 100% sure, but it's worth running, because if it's true, then this is a killer proof. If it's not true, then at worst you just get a load of interest in the debate channel, and I just get made a mockery of because I'm a flat earther, obviously. So by default you get laughed at. But it was content, and it was valid, and it was credible content, worthy of discussion, and it fitted the criteria nicely for what somebody in Nathan's position would want, because it is about debate. I wasn't totally sure. I was quite sure, but not absolutely convinced. And basically, this is where Ranty got involved. When I got back home and I gave the image footage to Ranty, I'd already put my video up saying, I think this is Ireland. I don't think it's Scotland. It could be Scotland, but I don't think it is. But a few weeks later, Ranty says to me, hey, you don't want to be looking on the right-hand side. You want to be looking down the left-hand side of the Isle of Man. I says, why is that? He said, because the reality is we can see Ireland in the south, not just in the north. And I'm like, you're joking, aren't you? Now, if the consequence of this means that Ireland in my north was around about 82 miles away, 85 miles away. Now that's pushing the normal limits of sight from like 40 to 50 miles on a clear day. And I'm seeing 80 and I'm thinking that's a lot. So that's why I was a little bit reserved that it might be actually Ireland, because I thought like 50 to 80 is a big jump. But now I've got Shane, who's known on YouTube as Ranty. He's suggesting that we might actually be seeing Ireland right the way down the far left-hand side. So he says, you need to look at this again. So me and Shane, Ranty, we're looking at it, and we're looking at it to try and get a consensus between the two of us. Can we say for certain that this is Ireland on both sides of the Isle of Man? So you got to picture this. You've got an island in the middle that's taking up the main focal point of what I'm looking at. But either side of it, there seems to be floating, like land that's floating. And that's the best way to describe it. So we're looking, and me and Ranty, or Shane, have come to the conclusion that we're probably seeing Ireland on both sides. However, at this point, we had no way of really proving it. So Nathan's debate channel was a good platform to put it out there just to see what critique we get. And effectively, in the long term, in hindsight, it's become peer review, because peer review process is putting it out there to scrutiny and then seeing what everybody comes to conclude. Now, obviously, the ball side of the discussion is never going to agree with us, but they can give us all the counter arguments for why it's not. And then we can look at them counter arguments and say, well, does it match the observation? Is it consistent with what the evidence is telling you overall? And between me and Nathan, I mean, I think we did somewhere between 20 and 25 shows dedicated to this observation. And the ballers were coming in show after show after show. And it was like that scene out of Airplane. I don't know if you remember the Airplane, but where that woman was getting battered by all the passengers because she was hysterical. There was a queue of them lined
up, right?
Yeah, they were lined up, and all the ballers are coming in and throwing blow after blow after blow. And I was stood there taking it because I believed that what I was seeing was Ireland. I mean, I might be mistaken, but I've got belief in what I'm looking at, and I can see the local geography. I know the local geography, and I believe I'm looking at what I'm looking at. So Nathan's platform was ideal for us to get A, peer review, B, fair critique or exaggerated critique, whichever. But C, it allows me to fine tune my perceptions and arguments for the evidence itself. But it also united Shane Ranty with myself, with Nathan, and then we got somebody from Field Engineer Corps, FE Corps, and he got involved because he was curious as well. So the four of us now become a bit of a team. And the ballers are stacking up, and they're coming in and they're throwing everything at us they could possibly throw at us. But the one key question that was always a stumbling block was, where's the curvature? Because we're seeing stuff that should not be seen. And this went on for show after show after show. Shane, Ranty, he'd put all the composite together, lined everything up. Chris had done what Chris had done from FE Core. He'd then done this observation, modelled it on the flat, and then got the results. And then he did it on a ball. And when he did it on a ball and he showed us what it was supposed to look like according to the geometry of the Earth, that was when we realized that this is massive. Because what you're looking at is one representation, right? You never get that alternative explanation. You never get a visualization that tells you what it should look like to be able to compare and contrast. But because this gent had spent time on this from FE Core, he'd modelled it all on a ball based on the evidence that we'd presented to him. And the ball was geometrically perfect to what they tell us their model is. So once we had the visualization of what it should be like, it just became it was literally a case of, well, spot the difference. That's what it should look like. This is what it's actually looking like. Which is it more consistent with? And in the end, Nathan and I both realized that by I don't know, by show maybe 20 or so, we had a paradigm shift where me and Nathan were no longer being like very defensive and fighting the good fight. We started to sit back and allow them to throw stuff at us, because we realized every time we go back to them and say, well, where's the curve? Where's the curvature? They had nothing. They come back with these explanations to do with refraction and non-standard refraction and all the maths and the formulas to explain this away. And me and Nathan were pointing them out, saying, well, there's no evidence to support that assertion to be true. And even if there was, you can't prove that it is true. Causation is an issue. So Nathan and I were now sitting back because we realized we're onto a winner here. This is a really good proof. So they were coming in and they were getting cornered, and we were battering them, and they wouldn't accept defeat. They would resort to ad hominem attacks, and everything was going crazy for a while. But me and Nathan were quietly sat in the background, and we're laughing with each other. And after each show, we'd have a 10-minute debrief where we were saying, "This is really, really good. Nobody's got anything on this. This is a really strong proof."
Can I just add something there, actually, Anthony, because this is something that, because it's radio, we've got to get across to the audience because we haven't got any pictures to actually explain it. But the reason it's such a good proof came, you're probably right, after about 20 shows, because we've got a couple of people in the background basically analysing the hell out of this, really giving us all of the data, and we're one step ahead. We're one step ahead of the Globers. But from the maths, the closest point that's observable is a lighthouse called Morgord Lighthouse, and it's 31 miles away. And now, just based on the maths for curvature and drop and how much potentially could be refracted back up into your line of sight, the thing shouldn't be visible. Now, this is the closest distinguishable landmark on the island, and it's gleaming, you can see it, and it shouldn't be there. It should be behind a wall of Earth curve. Now, that's not to say that there's just a little bit of ambiguity, like with Josh and Newicki's pictures, and there's been dozens, if not hundreds since, where there's this band of refraction that sits between you and the target. In this case, it would be the Isle of Man. So what you'd normally see is this cutting off of the bottom, and that is always co-opted into, well, that could be curvature, and the flat Earth would have to say, no, it's just this band of refraction, and then detail it, and it goes back and forth. In this instance, there's virtually no refraction. There's nothing blocking the view. Literally nothing. It's absolutely insignificant, as you would expect refraction to be in most instances. So you've got this teeny tiny band of refraction, so there's nothing to co-opt into curvature. You can just see this stuff. So we're into the position as soon as we saw this maths, where everything up and down the island, every other distinguishable mark that we can pick out, and I'm sure Ranty will go into this in a minute, but every single distinguishable mark that's on the picture is further behind the curve than this lighthouse. So in other words, it gets considerably worse, exponentially worse because of the curve calculation, to try and bring any of this stuff back up from behind the curve. And what I mean by that is, as you're standing looking at this target, the physics of Earth dictate that you have to angle your camera down to see the target and look directly through a wall of Earth curve. So the physics was immediately on our side. And although, as Anthony says, for the first maybe 10, 15 shows, we're not 100% sure of this. We haven't got Chris in the background doing, wireframe models using LiDAR maps that absolutely conclusively prove that it's flat and invisible on the ball model. But once we were sort of getting to that stage and really seeing it come together, we were very, very confident because we knew how good the proof was. But it was a win-win because essentially the main argument hooked around the scale of this photo. So on the ball side, they're saying the photo's closer to us when you scale it against the Isle of Man image in the background. And if you do that, what you effectively do is cut off the left-hand side and the right-hand side of the Isle of Man, negating any possibility of seeing Ireland on either side. And we're arguing it's not that, it's a different scale. And from my point of view, I can see it on Google Earth, although that's been argued by the other side as being completely useless, wrong, broken, doesn't work, no good for assessing any of this stuff.
Wait, you're saying that their globe model, Google Earth, is broken? That's what they're telling you now?
Well, this is when they left the debate. So at one stage, they were basically so on the ropes that they were having to tell us. They were having to tell us how broken Google was. You can't use Google for the elevations. It's nowhere near accurate, things like that. So this is when they stepped out, because they were doing the work for us. They were debunking what they claimed to be their model and saying it's useless, and then taking us to flat maps. So then it gets into, well, does the Ordnance Survey map count as a flat map, or does it represent the globes? Then we're checking how the geodesy works in terms of referencing this map and creating it. And it got to the stage where we've got Anthony on screen saying, well, to make this map, it's based on a reduction of this spheroid that they say they work from, this datum that they get the data from in the first instance, and they reduce back the curve to make it consistent with a flat plane. So now we're using flat maps to get the observer height and to get not to get the target height. This is where it gets, this is more to do with the debate than the proof. But what they really wanted to do was start focusing on the tippy tops of things. Now, for the audience, if you're listening and you can picture this little 3 or 4 pixels that is this lighthouse at 31 miles, but it's got all of the land below it. So yeah, you can see the light of the lighthouse itself, the ground it sits on, the shore. You can see all of it. But these guys want to essentially try and only bring back the easy bits, the tops of the lighthouses, because then to the audience it seems like they've done what they did in the ambiguous examples, the photos with the line of refraction, because that would normally be where the tippy top of the lighthouse was sat on top of. But in this instance, we're seeing all of it. So what the opposition wanted to do was spend probably 4 or 5 days arguing about where this photograph is taken from, the observation position, going to the nth degree to get maps to really scrutinise it. But when it comes to the target heights, the things they can't bring back because there's nothing blocking their sight, the line of sight's there, they want to go to random websites to get the heights of things like the lighthouses. There's no maps because they know what will happen. The second they go to the map, we can look at a contour line, pick absolutely any number that they come up with, and then start doing the curve calcs, and they won't be able to bring it back. What gets worse is that not only will they not be able to bring the target back, they can't bring all the land beneath it back. In essence, because we are looking at this target on a flat plane, we're seeing all of it. All of the landmarks, yeah, there's still a tiny bit of refraction, but it's only possible
we know you're out
on a
there.
flat plane.
We see you listening to our shows, and we know you want to be part of it.
There should be music there.
You have a business and you want brand recognition. You love our shows and the lineup because we don't censor our hosts, and you learn perspectives from all walks of life. We also know that you can't wait to hear the next broadcast. Everyone feels good when they hear their own name on the radio. It is time for you to contact TFR Live Marketing at gmail.com. Our station serves a demographic that you want to do business with. So why don't you join other growing businesses by advertising with Truth Frequency Radio? We are also carried by TuneIn and iHeart. Truth Frequency Radio is where you want to be. All you have to do is contact TFR Live Marketing at gmail.com.
I'm getting older and noticing that my body just doesn't work as well as it used to. So I like to keep fit as possible by hitting the gym a few times a week. Recently, I started having a nagging bicep pain, and it got so bad I couldn't even lift the weights. When I was complaining about it to a friend, he told me about angioprim. He said chelation helps remove toxins, heavy metals, and cholesterol in veins and arteries that may cause blockages. You know, after just 1 week of taking angioprim, the pain was gone, and now I'm back in the gym full strength. Scientific research proves the active ingredient in angioprim has superior oral chelation action that helps promote cardiovascular health. So to learn more, go to angioprim.com. That's ANGIOPRIM.com, or talk to a trained consultant. Call Angioprim toll-free at 877-882-7221. You'll feel better with more energy. Call 877-882-7221 or go to the website angioprim.com.
You want to be informed, so you listen to the news of the day. That's okay. We all do that. But does the connection leave you wondering if we will survive? War? Conflict? Deception. Well, now you have a place to go on your drive home from work. Tune in to Quantum Connections every Tuesday and Thursday from 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. Eastern Time. You'll get the news you won't hear anywhere else. And something else.
I'm Lucky, and with my co host, Star the Oracle, we will share up to the minute events around the world with the hopeful message that will let you get back to your life with love and with hope for peace. Join us, won't you? Like the iHeart app on your phone for the Truth Frequency Radio Network. Find the quantum connection with world news for your heart.
You are now tuned into the Truth Frequency.
Your protection from deception. TFR.
Truth Frequency Radio.
Earth throughout its life. And it got a little wider. And so it's not actually plate. And officially, it's an oblate. Slightly wider below the plate. Chubby. Chubby's it's like hair. What do you like? That's what to see. Do you want to be?
I don't know how Tony Montana got tacked onto the end of that Neil deGrasse Tyson clip, but there you have it.
Hey, they're both gangsters, so hey.
They are gangsters.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Ironworks on Truth Frequency Radio. We're so glad to have you all. Welcome, everybody there in chat, our regulars. We're so glad you are here to hear this amazing news. If you're just catching up, hold on. Strap in your seatbelts, everybody. The Earth is flat. Yes, it's done. We found it. We've got the proof right here. And we have the crew who is trying to explain it to us all. We've got a link there in the chat for you to see these pictures, and we'll have that in the description of the show later. But yeah, this is some amazing stuff. We've been joined by a few more members of the team. You want to go ahead and introduce everybody there, Nathan?
We've been joined by Chris specifically, who I'm hoping we didn't hear much from Ranty either, but yeah, hopefully if we can hear a little bit from both Shane and Chris. But yeah, how you doing? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Yeah.
I mean, can you tell us?
How you guys doing?
Good morning, guys. Welcome. We're so glad you are all here. And I've watched the video twice now, and it's just mind-blowing. We definitely will have that link there for you guys to see. Tell everybody again where to find it. Don't go watch it now. Go watch it after our show, but definitely you need to get your eyes on this quickly.
Well, I mean, the thing that probably go and look for to find the condensed version rather than sitting through 30 debates is called, I think it's called Flat Earth QED, and I think the strap line that goes with it is "The Earth is obviously and observably flat," and that's on my YouTube channel, which is Nathan Oakley 1980. So Nathan Oakley 1980 is the YouTube channel, and the video is called Flat Earth QED.
Yeah, if you search Flat Earth QED, it'll be one of the top 2 or 3 videos. It's there because QED is not a common search phrase, so clever bit of advertising to get it at the top. So it's dead easy for everyone to find. So basically, quick recap. If we're seeing Isle of Man, then that in itself is a flat Earth proof, depending on how much of it we can see. However, if we see island in the background, behind the Isle of Man, then not only is that a flat Earth proof, but it goes so far beyond being a flat Earth proof, which indeed is the reason why we're both here now. And we should be appearing on Globebusters on Sunday as well. There's talks with Bob and Journalism for Globebusters on Sunday. So just keep your eyes open for that, because this is going to be doing the rounds, because we want people to know. So if we see an Isle of Man in front of us, great, flat Earth proof. But if we see island behind, it's game over. So then it became a case of, right, we need to now interpret this evidence to see what can we actually see. So this is where Shane is called Ranty online. This is where Shane gets involved because he's nifty with a computer. So I said, Ranty, can you have a look at this and stitch this together into a nice big long composite, a landscape composite of one photo, just so that we can try and identify and plot features. And essentially, we're looking at a landscape with lots of dots all over it. It's like a braille pattern for the blind. So we're trying to work out what all these lights are. And this is where we try and get the scale. So it's not really about identifying the objects. It's more about identifying the objects to give us the scale. Because if we know how much we're looking at, then that tells us what we're seeing. We see island behind, or we don't. And for like 10 shows, we were all arguing over this one particular clump of evidence. And the issue was, which town is it we're looking at? Is it town A, B, or C? Now, our perception based on the evidence was town A, which is the furthest one away, because it looks that way. They wanted it to be town C, because that's a lot closer to us, and therefore it reduced the field of vision. But there was a third alternative, which was town B, and that was kind of like a compromise, happy in the middle. So the debate began to go around this, but we needed more evidence. We needed more interpretation of the evidence and analysis of the evidence. So this is where Shane gets involved, because he can stitch all these together and play around with stuff on a computer front. And if I pass you to Ranty now, and just let him talk to you about what he did and how he managed to tweak the images to reveal the gems that were in there, because it was the gift that keeps on giving. Ranty can talk you through it all.
Yes. I've known Anthony now for, I'd say, about 8 months or so. I had a channel up that was doing chemtrails and things like this, and the last thing I actually wanted to look into was flat Earth. Every time I was getting a suggestion to look at a flat Earth video, I thought, don't be ridiculous. So for years, I was always into the conspiracies, but flat Earth was the thing that I looked at last. Let's put it that way. And I watched this video though, and it's something registered, and I thought, well, actually, yeah, everywhere I look on the coast where I live, which is in the North Sea, it's flat as far as I can see. I can see 20 miles this way, I can see 20 miles that way. Maybe there's something to this. So, of course, I went out and I bought a P900 and put a video up about Blackpool Tower. And that's when Anthony contacted me and said, do you want to work together on seeing whether or not we can do some observations around here? And that's how I got to know Anthony. So when he told me he was going to St. Bees, we actually went up ourselves one time to have a look, see if we could see Blackpool Tower at night time. We went there and we didn't realise that Blackpool Tower wasn't lit up that night. So we'd travelled all the way there. We hadn't actually checked whether or not Blackpool Tower would be lit. So, of course, we couldn't see it. And the next time Anthony says he's going, I was going on holiday to Scotland. So I was in Scotland. He was at St. Bees. And he messaged me and he said, you're never going to guess what I've seen. I've seen Ireland. And I'm like, no way. He says, yeah, he says, I'm going to put a video up about it. So he did. Anyway, so it was we'd been talking about this particular video, and he'd said to me that he had this other video and he wasn't sure exactly what was on it. And I said, well, send it over and let me have a look at it. So when I started, it took me 10 minutes to notice. And I said, messaged him straight back and said, you can see Ireland here. He says, are you sure? I said, I'm absolutely positive you can. I says, give me an hour. I'll get back to you. And I quickly put a composite together, a real quick composite. And I said, there's this place here and this place there. And clearly you're seeing all this extra land. It's definitely Ireland, I'm telling you. So we ran with that composite for a few days until it, then I revisited it and I've actually stitched it, went back and did a full composite again, which was much better. And this was the one that was debated on for about 20 debates. Now, I don't particularly like the debating side of things. I'll come into the channel, but Anthony's the one that likes the debate. He's clever. He knows all the terms, and he's, if somebody tells him something, he goes and researches it. I just put the evidence together. So behind the scenes, we had myself, and we also had Chris, who was working on the 3D modeling side of things. So we were getting the evidence put together, and we were analysing stuff and, doing the calculations, the heights, what things we can see. And Anthony was doing the debates along with Nathan. And, of course, we'd have a debrief after each show, and we would talk about it and say, how do you think it went? Do you think they won any points here? How can we get them to fall into a trap? Because ultimately, we had the proof, but we wanted to not just to show the proof, but we wanted to destroy the ball at the same time. And that was a case of bringing on all the top ball earth people that are on YouTube and get them to debate us and get them to fall into the trap and get them to basically break apart their own model before we actually showed them the final nail in the coffin, which was this tiny lighthouse and a re-rendered image that brought out all the individual nuggets of every single place, every single contour line, every building, every house, everything down to something that was 51 miles away and easily identifiable. I think it's the lighthouse is 23 meters in height above the actual ocean. Clear as day on the image, and behind it was island. And we literally led them down the trap to the point where they actually boycotted the show. And all the ballers now don't come on the show. They have a boycott going because they don't want to talk about this anymore. They've had enough. They've been beaten so badly. And it was a great pleasure to be a part of that.
I think this is probably the best point to bring Chris into it, because Chris is from FE Core, and he's more analytical from a computer point of view. And Chris we were speaking to Chris, and because he was saying, "Hey, I'm quite kind of interested in this. If I can help," and we were like, "Yeah, come on, help! We need as much help as we can get." So what Chris ended up doing was modeling what we see, but not just modeling it on the flat. He modeled it on the ball. Because when you do the curve calculations on their model that they tell us is their calculator, you just get a number, and you can't visualize what it's supposed to look like, because everybody has their own perceptions of numbers, and some people are really analytical with numbers, and other people just see it as numbers and therefore not proof at all. So what Chris was able to then do was document everything, put it all together, but in a computer format to give us the visualization for what it should look like. And that involves a big, massive wall of water blocking what we should be looking at. And we're looking at stuff, and there's no wall of water in the way. But when it's modeled on it's geometrically accurate, it's precise, there's a massive wall of water in the way. Now, in the absence of having this evidence to be able to counter and to prove to other people what the alternative is, you're relying on the other people that are listening and watching the show to interpret what they're looking at and create their own visualization, which it's not easy to do. We're not scientists, you know what I mean? We're just normal people. So we needed somebody to show what it should actually look like. So this is where Chris comes into it. And if I just ask Chris now to talk through how he did it, what he did, and how he was able to show it, this is
Chris. Welcome, definitely welcome to the Ironworks. We're glad to have you. Real quick before you get into the technical side of the rendering, which is amazing. I was blown away by what you did. Explain to some of our listeners who may not know what FE Core actually is. I mean, some people are not in the pulse of this whole flat Earth thing, and they may not know exactly what that is. They may assume it's just another flat channel or something. Tell them what that's all about.
FE Core is a group of individuals that are doing private research, and it's a nonprofit foundation and a group of field engineers and professionals that come from the construction industry and so forth, and general field engineers, and we're doing research into just the general dynamics of Earth in this realm that we call Earth, and to discover what things really are and how things really function. And we have a major project coming up pretty soon that they're shooting a laser at over across Lake Balaton, and it's going to be a world record event, firing a laser across 67 miles of flat water lake, essentially to determine and search for curvature.
Amazing.
That is amazing. And that's a frozen lake, by the way. Just wanted to point that out. I did see a video the other day saying that that's a lake that freezes once out of the last decade, which we thought was really strange that FE Core would choose that lake. So of course, just a little bit of investigation by some of the other IRM guys shows that that's just completely false, and they're just picked one headline and ran with it basically.
But, weather permitting, it should be frozen, and that's the plan, is to shoot a laser across the entire 67-mile lake, I think it is, and determine the height above that lake that the laser will, bend, right? Collimate, supposedly.
We'll need to get you back on to talk about this, because that laser is what's really interesting. We'll have to have you back on, or somebody from FE Core, to talk about that laser and that experiment once it's concluded, because that's really exciting.
Yeah, I would contact Mike Kavanaugh. He's the he's the president of FE Cord, and just go through him, and I'm sure he'd hook you up. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I think we have contacted. I think Adam has reached out that way too. So we'll see what comes of that. All right. See, I'm done interrupting. You guys continue on. Sorry.
Now, my main role in this project here with the Isle of Man was, like Anthony said there, I just did the modeling. I grabbed a LiDAR map of the region of, well, actually the entire UK, which in LiDAR is a light distance and ranging maps that are basically made with aircraft that fly over, and they shoot the ground with lasers and get a light map. So it's very accurate data, the most accurate data I could find. And I took it into some software and converted it into wireframes so I could get the proper elevations and the layouts of the land and down to the inch, and started plotting out basically the findings of the video. And, like Anthony said, you shouldn't see the Isle of Man at all, really, because it's technically behind 165, 0.94 feet of water because of the curved bulge of the ball. And then when I started getting into the finer details, the keepers for me was once you start to realize that, well, Anthony's elevation when he shot the video, even at 52 feet, although I think he was probably closer to 34 feet, but even at 52 feet, he's physically standing underneath the foundation of the lighthouse that we were looking at on the film, because the lighthouse started at 84 feet. So there's a 30-foot difference. And these types of things just start to go click, click, click. And it's like, okay, well, we have to add the 169 feet or 65 feet of curve plus the difference between where he's standing and the elevation differences between the foundation of the lighthouse, and add it all together. And it's like, wow, you're looking through a lot of water to see that lighthouse. And so then I positioned the camera at the proper elevations at the lighthouse, and then I started to pitch the camera backwards. And when you watch the video, the audience will see this. When you take the camera to top dead center, which is essentially 52 feet at the lighthouse position, and then bend it backwards across the arc of your surface, about half a degree approximately to 31 miles, because Anthony was shooting the lighthouse from 31.5 miles away, then you'll see that the camera actually physically drops over 600 feet. As you pitch backwards on the curve, you're going down over the arch, so you've crossed back over the bulge and are backing down behind the bulge. So you're trying to look over the bulge, and you're 600 feet below where you started. And so once these things start to click in my mind when I was doing the modeling, it's like, this problem is just getting worse and worse and worse. And then once you're at the 600-foot position 31 miles away and start to pan the camera left to right, it's like, okay, well, we should be seeing, in the model, and it shows there should be curvature to the left and curvature to the right. So it's not just curvature in a straight line shot. When we do surveying in the construction industry, you make your target and do your trigonometry, and you can calculate distances, accurate to the inch, within reason on a good day. So if you have a transit, anything about construction, then that's how we do it. It's all flat mathematics to determine elevations and distances. So the curvature to the left and the curvature to the right became rather significant as well, because it's not just the curvature to the target in front of you, it's curvature left and right when you're looking through a camera like a P900 and you're looking 30, 40 miles away and you start to pan the camera left or right. It's like, well, where's all that curvature missing, in the lateral horizontal line, because it should be there. And I couldn't find it in the footage. So essentially, the model I built was probably my best failure. Mm-hmm. So I've, just completely failed. So I apologize. I failed to find any evidence.
The model failed to model the globe
by failing first.
Yeah, I couldn't reproduce the footage. I mean, that was the result. Is I could not in any way, shape, or form, after struggling for a week, to reproduce anything I saw in the footage. So I failed. That's the end of my story. Basically, that's where I'm at with it right now, and I continue to try and dial in on the things now that I've discovered these little things. I'm just
Now, some people,
tweaking it.
I've had some people ask questions. I was talking about this with some people on Twitter actually earlier tonight before I went to bed before the show, and some of the things they're throwing around are, of course, refraction and things like that. Now, explain how your program that you're using takes these things into account.
Well, I'm using Blender software, and you can program in. If you want to, you can program in refractive gradients in the atmospherics and put layers in there to account for all of those things. As Blender software is designed for making the movies and films and all the cartoon movies that everyone likes to watch, to animations, and it has all those things in there. In this particular model that I did, you didn't have to account for refraction, in that type of sense, because there wasn't really any in the video to speak of. There was I measured it. It was a small gradient on the horizon line, a bit of mirage. It's you could add refraction in it would make it even worse.
Right. Well, I know earlier Anthony was talking about how the the clearness, the view he was getting almost seemed like he was looking through a porthole across over there to Ireland. But
that was
I noticed here like right now it's wintertime here in America, and over there you guys are in summertime. So I noticed in the winter, we were talking about that a little earlier today on the chat, that some of these effects we're seeing of this alleged curvature in some of these fake videos that are being put out in pictures. It's number one, it's such a short curvature that I think Tony had an interesting phrase about that curvature. Tony, what was that you were saying a little earlier?
Well, obviously the big in guy at the moment on the ball side is a guy called Soundly, and he's done observations over. He's in a basin area. He's in a sump of an area where he's in Tennessee or little.
No, it's down here in Louisiana by me. Yes, about 2 hours away.
And it is a sump. It's literally a sump. And his claim is that on 16 miles, he's got curve that makes it look like we live on a basketball. And I'm like, this is totally inconsistent with this at 120, 140 miles. And it's flat as a pancake. So obviously, there's a direct conflict there. So he becomes my enemy and I become his. And basically, it's which is true. Is it 16 miles and we're seeing curvature the size of a basketball? Or is it 140 miles and it's flat as a pancake? So you've got to literally pick your side. Which evidence do you accept to be true? And my phrase that I said about his 16-mile observation, I was like, "Come on, dude, I can piss further than 16 miles." And he didn't like that. He hasn't spoke to me since.
Yes, he's not too happy with us right now, I believe. As we constantly, as a flat Earth, just overall keeps debunking his idiocy left and right. So sorry, I didn't mean to get sidetracked, and definitely don't want to give him any extra credits.
No, don't. We're not going to give him credit. But what I want to do is, if I can bring Nathan back into the discussion at this point, because I want him to talk about the tactics that were used by the ballers. And when we were getting close to nailing this, to like literally the final hammer, the final nail in the coffin, we'd have them like there was a physicist. He's a self-proclaimed physicist, but nonetheless, because he claims to be a physicist, he knows all the maths and he knows all the formulas, and he can apply them all fantastically with like almost Einsteinian technique. Yet we had him up against the ropes, and we were battering him, and. I mean, we've got 4 minutes to go before we get to the break. Maybe it's better to bring Nathan in after the break. But it was glorious. Go on.
I could mention one technical point possibly that might make things a little more
That'll
clear
work,
too
yes,
for the audience. And just a quick one before we go to a break is you had mentioned the refraction, and that became a big part of the debate was what about refraction and this and that, and how can refraction bring an entire island that's 2,013 feet high back up into view, because technically, at the distance to Ireland on the other end at 140 miles, well, the entire island would be gone. Like all 2,000 feet would be out of sight. And even to the 31-mile point of the lighthouse, the refracted hidden drop is still 276.94 feet, right? So you should not see the lighthouse, because the lighthouse itself is only has a focal point of 213 feet. So you're still missing the entire lighthouse. It should not appear in the video whatsoever. So from the low-hanging fruit to the lighthouse to both ends, all the way to Ireland, none of that should be visible. And that's that's the keeper for me right there, is that you shouldn't see any of it. So
Well, it's great that this has been so, like, you guys are hitting the nails on the head. I mean, one of the main things we keep hearing is, okay, I want some peer review on some of your flat Earth nonsense. Well, I think you guys have covered the peer review aspect. And I can't tell you the times I've been asked, why can't I see Hawaii from California? Why can't I see Tokyo from my front porch? How about seeing Ireland from England? How's that do? Does that do anything for you?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, putting this into context, Hawaii from New York or whatever two landmarks you pick, you're assuming that the atmosphere has got no opacity to it. We all think it's kind of a presupposition that you should see for miles and miles and miles. But the bit that people don't realize is that there is moisture, smog, pollen, general things in the atmosphere that we're looking through that stop us from seeing for miles and miles and miles and miles. So essentially, if you get a really crystal clear day and you have a P900, go and find a hill, stand on it, and see what you can see, the farthest thing that you can see. Zoom right the way in, the way I did, and then come back to Google and try and work out what you're looking at. Because if it's a crystal clear day and you're seeing as far as what you can possibly see, you'd be gobsmacked at what you actually come back with evidence-wise, and you'll be like, oh my God, how am I going to argue this? This is ridiculous. And that's what I found. I didn't think in a million years I would see Ireland from England, but all the people in comments and local to that area were saying, I see Ireland all the time with just binoculars. What are you talking about?
Like,
and
right.
Then you begin to realize that the locals are not in the FE discussion, and we're seeing it as a massive thing. And they're like, "What are you talking about?" And then you realize that that nobody really knows that the Earth is as small as what it actually is when it comes to the geometry, and that's the key point.
I've got 60 seconds just before the break. I will get one thing in before we get to the obfuscation of all the opponents. But one thing that was obvious was that even the people who believe that they're on a ball were finding it very difficult to conceptualize what they had to conceptualize in order to accept that they're on a ball. So I would say to people, well, what you're looking at is a holographic projection of the land that sits behind the Earth curve wall. And a glober would say, you're an idiot, it's not a hologram, because it's really difficult for them to accept, as they must, that it is.
That's it.
All right, thanks, guys. We will all be back on the other side of this break. You're listening to the Ironworks on Truth Frequency Radio.
Hello, YouTube. I hope you're well. Spotlight is on Truth Frequency Radio. You've got this guy, Chris Geo, and his sidekick, Cherie Geo. They're obviously both practicing New Age shaman. Then you've got Satanic Kev Baker with his 666 hand sign logo. Then you've got Frank Castle with his skull t-shirt. Nice one, mate. In the first sentence of their mission statement, they actually reveal to you they're actually engaged in trying to expand the consciousness of humanity by shining the light into the darkness.
No denial, missing number updated. I'm Elliot Francis. Published reports claim during a meeting on immigration Thursday, President Trump used a vulgar curse to suggest the U.S. should not accept immigrants from countries such as Haiti or Africa. Bob Costantini reports.
As the president and congressional Republicans and Democrats look for a compromise on immigration, the Washington Post is publishing a behind-closed-door profane quote from Mr. Trump, meeting with some lawmakers in the Oval Office when they suggested he restore temporary legal status to immigrants from Central American and African nations that the president has been ending. The Post reports the president said, quote, "Why are we having all these people from blank whole countries come here?" End quote. He asked why there couldn't be more refugees from places like Norway, whose prime minister visited the White House Wednesday, according to the paper. Bob Costantini, Washington.
Authorities have released the names of 17 people killed by mudslides in California. They're also updating the number of people reported as still missing. County Sheriff Bill Brown.
At this point, we're saddened to say that our consolidated list shows that there are 43 people now who may be considered as missing. It doesn't mean that they are all actively missing, but there are 43 people that we are now taking a look into and actively investigating to determine whether or not they are.
A video of a recently discharged hospital patient left at a bus stop on a cold night in Baltimore has caused widespread outrage and prompted an investigation. Athena Jones has details.
This is a disturbing and upsetting video. This happened earlier this week outside the University of Maryland Medical Center in Baltimore when a patient was discharged overnight at a bus stop right outside that hospital wearing nothing but a thin hospital gown and socks, no underwear, on a night where the temperatures were in the mid-30s. The woman in the video appears to be disoriented and under some sort of distress. She's moaning loudly at various points in the video.
Ahead of Friday's opening bell on Wall Street, right now Dow futures up 105. I'm Elliot Francis.
This is the Truth Frequency Radio Network. TFR. Truth Frequency.
We'll call it 10 seconds.
Wherever you are, make it TFR. Truth Frequency Radio.
This is the American Forces Vietnam Network.
Good morning, TFR.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. What's wrong with you? By thinking, you're thinking, out on two.
Good morning, Truth Frequency Radio. My name is Josh Corey. You're listening to the Ironworks. I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Walter Johnson. Walter.
Good morning, good morning, good morning, Josh. How are you, sir?
I'm better than I deserve. What's that Jimmy Jean says? Can't get no better.
That's it. It can't get no better. Today, we will show that it can't get no better. My goodness, do we have some exciting news. We will get to it. Can't wait to unleash it on you guys. Good morning to everyone out there, or good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are across the plane. I know we have some friends over there in the pond who are listening. Adam, good morning over there. I know you're excited for this news to unleash on the public this morning. My goodness, when you showed us the video yesterday and we got in touch with these guys yesterday, and I could hardly sleep getting ready for the show. So we are excited. We are this is it. I mean, this is proof you guys have been waiting for it in the flat earth community. Pearheads have been waiting for it. Man, I'm just excited. I'm going to shut up for a second before I just start rambling.
It is pretty huge. It's yeah, it's totally had my mind spinning for the last 12 hours. Completely rocked back on my heels. I'm really excited. Let's see, just a couple of things. So here's something interesting. On this day in 1967, I wanted to get this out of the way real quick. Dr. James Bedford becomes the first person to be cryonically preserved with the intent of future resuscitation and remains preserved at the Alcor Life Extension Foundation. Wherever in the world that is, I'd be curious to find out. But apparently he was just the first of many people to become frozen with the attempts to eventually they'll be thawed out and brought back to life. Which
that everything was being seen. We're seeing down to the shore. There's no curve blocking our way. So it stopped being about the evidence and became about discrediting the evidence as opposed to examining the evidence. So everything we did, or moreover, discrediting Anthony Riley or Shane, and towards the end, me to a certain extent in terms of my moderation on the panel. But the name of the game was basically discrediting anyone and everything that had anything to do with this particular piece of evidence. So whenever you're looking at anything and you get to a point where we get them on the ropes, this is in the initial shows where we're a bit more defensive, shall we say, you would end up with a reasonable conversation, 2 or 3 people on the panel, like I say, the physicist or the mathematician or the son of an astronaut, who we'll get to later. But you've got a reasonable conversation. But when you get them on the ropes, or if Anthony's got them on the ropes, or whoever other people had chimed into this conversation too, is a completely open panel, you'd find that suddenly there'd be a panel with 10 people on it, and people making unbelievable amounts of noise and trying to deliberately swear and basically just cause chaos. And if that failed, it would be try and shut the hangout down with pornography. So start to play pornography when you get to the absolute pinnacle of a really cracking point that wrecked a globe argument. Suddenly you'd have people jumping in and playing pornography on screen, and I'm frantically, trying to control OBS and stop it going on screen, and occasionally I'd fail and have to shut the show down and edit it all out afterwards. But, we were battling our way through because essentially the truth is on our side. So we didn't recognise it at that moment, but what they're basically doing is purely for the audience. It's not for us. We know what we've got, or we think we know what we've got at this stage. But I would assume, we don't know this either, but they knew the writing was on the wall. These guys aren't stupid, so they're looking at this, and it's essentially down to them to make it seem to the audience like it sits in a grey area. And it doesn't. It doesn't sit in a grey area. So they're having to do other things. They're having to really try their absolute best as a team. And it seemed like, I don't know if Anthony will agree with me, but towards the end, they seemed like a pack of wolves. They really did seem quite vicious. I mean, on some of the last shows, after they had said that they were boycotting, they were doxing, and for people who are unfamiliar with that term, it just means documents. So they were gathering up our documents online, things like our addresses and phone numbers, so that they could publish it on the debate show. So to get around the pornography, I've moved all of the screen around so you can't see people as they join. I've locked the screen to me, so no one's ever on screen unless I specifically click on them. I've tried to get around it, and the way they got around that was to join, and just off screen they can still present to the internal chat. So they were doxing us on the show, and this is all just to distract from us talking about the fact that this proves the Earth is obviously and observably flat and demonstrable. But we didn't have this diamond, we didn't have the lighthouse, the sort of last nail in the coffin, the proof, if you will. So it can be put into contention. So there is still definitely a motivation on the globe side to convince the audience that this is, falls into the realms of grey area. We can account for it. And the way they accounted for it was absolutely brilliant, because they had to, Anthony's already explained this to the audience, we've got a picture on a clear day. It's very, very simple for us to explain as flat earthers. It's a clear day, we see further. Simple. That's the end of the explanation on the flat earth side. No models required, nothing. It's just as simple as that. For the globers to accept this, they have to accept nonsense on top of nonsense on top of nonsense. And for them to explain this, you essentially have all of these things that are hidden by the earth wall, which we've explained, being miraged up above the horizon by varying different degrees further and further down the coast of the Isle of Man, because at this point we're not arguing necessarily about Ireland. And the reason we're not is because, and this is why I thought it was such a strong debating point, it was a win-win. It didn't matter if we were seeing Isle of Man or Ireland. Both circumstances left flat Earth with a win, because we shouldn't see any of the targets. As we pointed out, Morgul, the nearest target, is already behind the curve of the Earth. So it's win-win no matter what way it goes. So that being said, we've got an argument about an outcrop of land, which is essentially Ireland. We've established this now beyond any doubt. So this outcrop of land is the lowest point of the Isle of Man. And when we're debating this point, we're still talking about something about, 30 feet high, this outcrop of land with this lighthouse on it. And that in itself, if we argue that that is the outcrop of land, because it's the last thing we see in the photo, that's a flat earth proof. So I'm more than happy to argue about this all day long, non-stop, constantly talking about it. But the way they get around it, sorry, I get to my point, is to say that they have the perfect storm. The non-standard refraction. So in this spherical model, they've in recent days put into these calculations something called standard refraction. So they can basically get around the fact that we live on a flat Earth a little bit easier when it comes to some tricky maths. But that didn't work. I mean, that fell so far short when they applied the standard refraction maths that they had to move up the game, move the goalpost really wide to the point of ludicrous. It was ludicrous what they were presenting. So what they're in essence saying, this is the mathematician and the physicist, is that we have the perfect storm of refraction so that everything is being loomed up at these varying gradients so that you can basically see all the way around the world. And Anthony's response to this, so it was, well, okay, so if I get enough altitude and a clear enough day and look through my telescope, I can see my own arse in the telescope. And they had to agree. So we marvellous material for me and my channel, edit it all together, brilliant, with us basically pointing out that on the spherical model...
song with a remix, for sure.
Yeah, you've got to accept this. I mean, they slightly changed the phrasing and said, see your own head. But yeah, you have to accept that you can see your own head in order to accept this image. Because you can't just accept that you can see them. You can't see them on the globe model. You don't have line of sight with them. There is a wall in the way. And these guys understand the physics. They do get it. So when they're describing it on Google Earth, they're dragging lines across and saying, well, these aren't sight lines. These are curving around the Earth. Because they get it. But we know we can see these things. They just have to accept that they're holograms. So, through the porn bombing, through the doxing, through the total ridicule that Anthony got, we end up where we're dissecting up the observation position. We're basically looking at where he's standing in relation to this observation, the Isle of Man. And they're arguing for days and days and days and days about this observation point, going to all and sundry, as many different references as they can, to get away from the fact that Google Earth says it's at 34 feet. And that's what we're testing. We're testing the validity of Google Earth. That's what the model that we're trying to break and prove that it's incorrect. But they don't want to use it. They just don't want to use it. They'd much, much rather attack Anthony's credibility. He's lying about the position. Let's go to random Google photographs of this location that force the perspective to make this basically mound. It's not very high. You can't even call it a cliff. I mean, maybe Anthony, can you tell us a bit about the endless arguments about the observer position? Because it went on for days.
Well, the reality is this. You need to have a certain elevation of observer height to be able to see what we can see. So all I did was I put in the value it said on Google Earth. Okay, that was it. That's what everybody does. Everybody puts in the value on Google Earth. A, because it's convenient, but B, because it's their model. And they all say things like, well, can I see your flat Earth model, please? And obviously we don't have one. We also don't have $52 million budget per day to make one. So these guys have got a model, and all I did was use their model, okay? So when it became apparent that they needed me higher, every trick in the book was thrown my way to try and put my elevation up. And I stood my ground. I just said, look, I don't care whether it's 2 million feet. What it says on your model is what I'm putting in because this is your model. I'm a flat earther. I'm questioning your model. I don't care what the actual height was. I'm just testing your model. And they didn't like that because they thought that was dishonest of me because how dare you put something in that you know to be false? And I don't even know it's even false, but that's what they were saying back to me. I don't have any experience of working at heights to be able to make an intelligent estimation of how high I was. As far as I saw it, I was just on a hill putting in the height on Google Earth, and that was it. But then, no. They wanted me to take tape measures. And why did you not take tape measures with you and measure the height of this cliff? Well, why would anybody do that? In retrospect, hindsight, sure, it's becoming a bit of a problem now. But in reality, it's perfectly acceptable to challenge their model based on the values that their models give, right? So now we've got this argument over the exact height. So I'm saying, no, we're putting in Google Earth. And they won't allow that because it's only showing at 35 or 52 feet, depending on which video we're referencing. So, but once they began to realize that they need, even if it's our Isle of Man, they need me at half a mile in elevation to see what we're seeing because that's what's required to see behind the hump of water that's not in front of us. So they need half a mile if it's Isle of Man, and they've got 50 feet. That's it, 50 feet, and they need half a mile. But if it's island, it's 2.5. It's 2 to 2.5 miles that we're looking. It's 2.5 miles of observer height that they need. So it becomes completely moot whether or not I'm at 52 feet, 87 feet, 110 feet. They need miles, not feet.
Yeah,
they
but
need miles of observer height.
that wasn't the point I was making. The point I was making was that what they needed to do was make you seem like you had no credibility. So to say that you are lying about the height, regardless of how and why you have picked that measurement, yes, we're just picking the model. But the point was, let's make Anthony Riley seem like he's lied. He's forging this. So there's a whole series by the guy I talked to about developing Flat Earth debate as a platform. So Jeremy Wartby was discussing this, and he has now released a series called Faking Flat, where he basically just tries to discredit Anthony Riley in his observer position. That's all that he did in that particular video, claim lies. In the aftermath, so this is my, I'll shut up after this, because this for me was an absolute gem. We've got a guy who's on some of the debates, and he's in the chat constantly, called Al K, Scottish guy. Now, this guy is very much involved with this discussion. He goes with a different chap, I don't know if it's his real name, but called Miles Davis, another YouTuber, to replicate the observation. Al K takes the same camera with him to go and replicate the observation. Now, this is after days and days of discussion about Anthony Riley's credibility because he hasn't taken a bloody tape measure with him to measure this hill when he's doing basically tourist shots. He's got a nice clear day. He's gone to get the tower. It's failed because it's too murky in that way. So he's like, oh, well, it's a nice clear day here at the Isle of Man. I'll take pictures of this. I'll zoom in on the people on the beach and I'll zoom in on the island. He's not there to take experimental readings of anything in this instance. However, these two gentlemen are absolutely there to debunk Riley. That's their main purpose. That's what they're doing. So this guy, right, in the recent comments section of one of my videos, I think it was a Flat Earth debate, not Flat Earth QED, he's now trying to distance himself. And he's saying, you have no evidence of me even being a part of this discussion about the Isle of Man. It's like, you having me on? You're the guy going to debunk it. You're literally going to the exact observer position. Not only that, you've failed to give us any measurements of the height, presumably because it probably matches Google perfectly. They won't give us any GPS coordinates. It's like, what's going on? You're trying to debunk it. Rather than giving us the data that debunks the observation, you're trying to distance yourself. I've got nothing to do with this. There's nothing to do with me. I had no part of this discussion. It's like, no. I was just going to the exact same location for maybe to take some, tourist shots as well. It's like, what a ridiculous back out.
The bigger thing for me on this particular debunking attempt was not that they were going to do it, because I'm confident with what I saw that day. I know what I saw. I know how hard it was for me to see what I saw in relation to the Isle of Man. That was really easy to see because it was right in front of my nose. They're going to try and debunk me. The one piece of evidence that they didn't show and haven't shown so far, and I'm sure doesn't even exist because I've asked them to produce it, they failed to repeat the observation, meaning that they could see Isle of Man in front of them. But the key part that was contentious was island behind it. I don't believe they've got this evidence to do anything because they were trying to go to get island. I could see by the snippet that I saw that the visibility was significantly less. Not a lot less, but definitely enough to reduce the visibility from the 85 miles island that I could see in the background. They weren't going to be seeing that because the visibility was not good enough. And thereby failing to reproduce my experimental results proves that I was indeed seeing further. Therefore, I am actually looking at island. So I said to them, listen, guys, I don't want to see the Isle of Man in the foreground. I want to see the bits to the far left and far right because that's the bit that you guys said that I wasn't seeing. So I know that they can't see it. So what they should be showing as they pan left and pan right is they should be showing the same evidence that we've produced because we're only looking at Isle of Man. Now, they didn't do it. They showed that they went there and they showed that they were doing the observation and they showed the Isle of Man. But they didn't pan right or left to show the extremities of, which is where island is. And the reason they didn't do that is because they didn't catch it, and that's because they couldn't see far enough.
We did get an interesting.
That we were, in fact.
I was just going to say we got an interesting concession in that regard, though, because we had, I mentioned him earlier, a guy called M. Scott Veach, who was alleged, again, this is self-proclaimed, but he said he was the son of an astronaut. So we're in debate number 101, or no, probably not even that, probably 88 or something. We're definitely well into the Isle of Man stuff. And Anthony says to me on the show, live, we're broadcasting, a guy in the chat says he's the son of an astronaut. We're like, really? So yeah, get on, the link's public. Come on, just jump in. Next thing you know, a minute later, M. Scott Veach is on the panel telling us all about his dad and his stories of going to space. And he's like, the other ballers, many in number, were like, well, what do you say to that, guys? This guy saying he was told stories about being in space. And we're like, well, we would just assert that your dad's lying, as are all the people who sat around that table and told those stories. So it quickly sort of nipped that in the bud that we weren't afraid to just call these guys liars, because that's what we take them to be. There's no two ways about this. But then he started to become a friendly. He's like involved in the conversation, debating about the Isle of Man photography, saying how interesting it is. And, getting on to show 9095, he gets in touch with Anthony and concedes that it is Ireland. Says it is Ireland, but doesn't change anything. We're still on a globe. And we're like, what? Where's your excuse for it? No excuse. Just an acceptance of I can see the back of my head in the refraction. Just basically, I'll accept whatever nonsense is put to me, and just swallow it whole, because obviously we live on a globe. But that was the attitude. But he gave us a concession. He accepted that we were looking at Isle of Man, and he had asked for the composite. So he got in touch with Shane, got in touch with us on the show, acquired the composite, and then conceded that we saw Ireland. Amazing.
But with regards to these gents that went back, the fact that they failed to replicate the results of the observation that I took means that they weren't seeing far enough to see Ireland, and they haven't released that info. In fact, it went to the point where the rumours were that somebody's going back from the baller side, and they're going to repeat your experiment. I hope you're going to stand your ground when they come back with the proof. And then all of a sudden, nothing happened. So we knew something was happening over the weekend.
Something happened. Suddenly, my moderation skills were appalling. Suddenly, I wasn't a good enough moderator on the debate channel. Suddenly, they had to boycott the show. Because basically, at that point, it's like, well, every single word that comes out of your mouth makes your case for the globe worse. So your best move is to disappear. And it got worse because we still carried on. I figured another workaround with the show to keep it going, and we kept the show going on Skype. But it meant that we were still talking about it. So they had to figure another way of trying to shut down the show. They had to try and stop anybody from joining the show. So they set in these things called snipers, where there's an algorithm error, whatever we want to call it, a flaw with Google, where you can join the show, and without me detailing it for other people to do it, you can remove people from the show.
Be careful, don't give them any more ammunition.
No, I'm not going to tell them how to do it. But I only found out this myself recently to try and figure a workaround, which I now have done, so I don't get sniped. But essentially, you can join the show, and with a little trick that you may or may not know, you can remove people from the live show. And that's what they wanted to do, because they realised that nobody should be talking to us. They've got to shut it down. They can't have us continually talking about categoric proof that the Earth is flat. So that's what they did. They stopped anybody from talking to us, and that's how it was for a couple of shows. It started to fade out. Now we shall see how things go. The show's still running, but ultimately, Flat Earth Debate for a couple of shows became just Flat Earthers talking about how marvellous this Flat Earth proof was, or anybody who joined to try and challenge it, because obviously this is a small handful of people that are trying to stop this from happening and stop this from coming out. There's still going to be people out there that think they're on a globe that come in and go, well, what do you mean? How does this prove it's... But obviously, anybody who does that is going to make it look worse for the globe. So they wanted rid of everybody. So they set snipers in place, trying to stop anybody talking to us. And now we're here talking to you, a couple of thousand live listeners.
I find that a very interesting side. Part of what I've learned about in the process was just the very existence of the fact that people can go into Google, Hangouts and so forth, and snipe people out, and that Google must be aware of the issues with that. They would have to be aware of that, and the fact that it's allowed to exist as some sort of nefarious form of censorship. It's almost like a backhanded censorship where people have that ability to stop the truth and freedom and information of getting out there.
We dealt with it a few weeks on our Flat Earth Friday show we do on our YouTube channel on Iron Room Media, and then we finally just all went over to Skype and kind of eliminated the issue. But, knock on wood, it's still working so far, but I'm sure they're working on anything they can to get into these calls as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Essentially what it was with Nathan is that he allowed his channel to be an open platform for anybody to come in and discuss the shape of the Earth. So at any one point in time, there could be as many as 10 people in the panel, as many as maybe, let's say, 9 people supporting the ball and 1 flat earther, or it could be 5 and 5, or or it could be 10 and 0. It just who happened to turn up on the day. And they were always full. The first 77 shows or so were always full. In fact, probably the first 90 shows were always full. And then it got to the point where people were dropping off and weren't willing to come in and debate this anymore. And then obviously, because you have this open platform, that is their back door. If people know how to do it, they can get into the show and they can sit in the background waiting. And anybody that joins the show can then be immediately sniped from it. So it was an open platform, but people weren't allowed to offer a voice. So nobody could talk. Anybody that came in was immediately ejected from the show. So we had to do a workaround through Skype to actually continue the show and continue producing the evidence. And this gave us the further push to re-examine the evidence and find out exactly why they were trying to shut the show down and what was in the composite.
Yeah, and that's exactly one of the main things I learned from the experience too. Is it's because of those little things that are like nefarious things that are allowed to happen in the bigger picture. Like I'm talking big picture, social context and our collective ability as humans to get truth and information out there. It's that's not a good thing in that aspect. It's like a total loss of logos, right? There's no more space for logical conversation, proper debate. Nathan did his best to attempt to allow for a forum for a proper civil debate, and that's the brilliance of it for me, is just to see how badly it falls apart, and that's the jewel, right? There's a jewel right there to show how impossible it is to have a logical conversation about a specific topic, and that being the shape of the Earth. And that's
and I think this is the point where I just want to say that Nathan's role in this was quite unique, because the flat Earth debate on the circuit itself is often described by the ballers as an echo chamber. And the reason why it's an echo chamber is because of the people that deliberately disrupt it. So on the one hand, they're claiming that it's an echo chamber, but on the other hand, when Nathan gives them the open link and the open platform for them to come in and present out their arguments or evidence that they believe that they accept to be truth for the shape of the Earth, it started off great initially, but once flat earthers had come across a truth that was strong.
And yes, that is the hint music. We appreciate that. We'll get back to that right after the break on the other side. Guys, thank you so much. You are listening to the Ironworks on Truth Frequency Radio. We're talking to the crew from the Flat Earth QED video, and we'll have a whole lot more to wrap it up coming up after the break.
Hey everyone, it's Chris Gio, founder of Truth Frequency Radio and host of Beyond the Veil. The mainstream media and establishment are running scared right now, and they've prominently featured truthfrequencyradio.com as number 89 on the federal government's hit list, also known as the fake news list, which is essentially a list of sites slated for censorship on Facebook, YouTube, Google, and other social media. Now is the time for you to get involved. Share your favorite TFR shows far and wide on forums and social media. Tell your friends and family about your favorite shows. If you're a business owner, get in touch with us to feature your product or service right here on TFR. And if you haven't done so already, become a TFR supporter now and get unlimited commercial-free downloads in high quality. Visit truthfrequencyradio.com/sign-up. Thank you for making TFR the leader in independent and uncensored talk radio. Truth Frequency Radio, your protection from deception.
Okay, nurse, let's get this man to the ER stat.
Right away, doctor.
We see this every day. Heart attack or angina pain due to blocked and clogged arteries. Chelation can remove obstructions or blockages from arteries and help avoid painful and expensive surgery. Now there's Angioprim. It's a liquid oral chelation product that you take with juice. You start to feel the results fast. Angioprim increases blood flow all over the body, and that means more energy and strength to take on the day with less aches and pains. 60 years of research has gone into chelation, and Angioprim is the result. A safe and easy way to unblock your veins and arteries from buildup that slow circulation.
Paging Dr. Jones. Please report to the emergency room right away.
Log on now for a special radio offer from Angioprim. That's angioprim.com/radio. ANGIOPRIM. Angioprim.com/radio or call 877-882-7221. That's 877-882-7221.
We exist in the security and comfort of our worlds. Paved paths, lights, and manicured lawns give us peace of mind that our world has been tamed, and we are its master. But other worlds exist on the edge of our sight. On the edge of our awareness, the shadows move. The woods fill with the unblinking eyes of the nightmares our ancestors warned us about. Some of us have stumbled into these forgotten realms, whether on purpose or completely by surprise. I'm Brent Thomas. Join us on the Paranormal Portal Friday and Saturday nights from 10 p.m. to midnight Pacific Standard Time as we journey into the world of the paranormal phenomena.
Enter the Paranormal Portal if you dare.
Real people, real radio.
Initiating the truth frequency. This is Truth Frequency Radio.
Fridays and Saturdays at midnight, right here on Truth Frequency Radio, is Into the Microcosm with Jimmy Jean. Check out his newest series he's starting out. From Russell Means to Leonard Peltier to Sitting Bull and Red Cloud, we are all living on the reservation. Just too few of us realize it.
Indeed.
So check out Jimmy Jean on Fridays and Saturdays, right here at midnight.
Can't get no better.
Can't get no better. And you're listening to the Ironworks with Walt and Josh. We are joined by an awesome group of guys. This has been such an amazing show. I am so excited with what they have done, what they've shown, what they've accomplished. We are joined by Anthony Riley, Nathan Oakley, Shane Cook, and I'm forgetting somebody. I'm forgetting Chris Seeley. Sorry, yeah.
Chris Monk. Chris Monk.
Monk, sorry. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on today. This has been an amazing 3/4 of the show. This is our last little bit. I'm just so impressed with what you guys managed to get out there. This is absolutely amazing.
Well, we realized that there had to be some reason why we were becoming the targets of personal attacks. The show was becoming under attack daily. The hate and the vitriol and the amount of videos that went out about all of us showed us that there was something hiding. There had to be something hiding in that composite that we hadn't analysed properly. So
right. Well, when they start doxing you guys live, I mean that ought to tell you you're hovering over the target pretty close.
Well, yeah. I mean, we had people phone us up in the middle of the night, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, threatening our lives, saying they were going to attack my parents, they were going to do this, they were going to do that. And then there was also the silent calls and just the harassment, basically. And we knew that this wasn't just me, so there was other people. Anthony suffered it too. And we realised that we need to fight back and we need to go back to this composite. We need to start from scratch and find out exactly why they are trying to shut this debate down. And that's what I did. I went back. I spent a couple of days going through every single part, and everything was the more I went through it, the more it revealed. And this was when I presented it to Nathan, who I think had a very good reaction to the Lighthouse. And of course, we knew it was game over then, and we had 2 or 3 debates after this where we were just sitting back and just very happy with what we knew was in the image. Until we actually did the QED a couple of nights ago, and yeah, that was the best point. Was when it was their attacks on us that made us revisit the evidence, and had they not done this, we wouldn't have got the proof that we actually have now. So
I'm
it's all thanks to them.
I'm delighted that that's the way it went down, because that's what I wanted to show on Flat Earth Debate. So it was my intention to display exactly that, because I've been doing interviews for quite some time on this subject, and I didn't necessarily continue watching loads and loads of Flat Earth videos. So what I was doing was searching Flat Earth Live and finding that people who didn't know a great deal about the subject were ridiculing it and saying it's nonsense. So I would jump in, if the link was given out, I'd jump in and go in and debate it, and I really, really enjoyed it. But what I continually found was I would have my volume turned down, I'd be talked over by 20 people, I wouldn't be allowed to get to the end of my point, I'd be ejected and banned, things of that nature. And I thought, well, what I want to show that, but I don't want to be on the one side of the fence that's really angry when my point gets destroyed or I lose an argument, so I kick a guest. I wanted it to be the opposite of that, so that when people like, I'm not going to name any names, but there was a certain individual that was literally being repugnant towards Shane and his family, and I published the chat. So in all of these videos, the chat feed was going up, and it was the pits. I mean, it was disgusting, but I wanted to show that, to show the kind of nonsense you have to deal with just for showing what's on a photograph. Literally, you're just literally saying, here's a photograph, this is what's in it. That's all we were doing. What you see is what you get, this is what's there. That's all we need to do as flat earthers. So we're not giving any, grandiose explanations. We're not getting anybody to accept anything exceptional or out of the ordinary. We're just saying, here's a photo, this is what's there. And the amount of nonsense that we put up with was all seen. Everybody in the audience got to see it firsthand, and normally you don't. Normally the person's kicked out. Normally the person's turned down, you don't get to hear them. And I'd heard the same criticisms on both sides of the argument. So for the Globers, they would say that they would join a flat earth circle jerk where they're all patting each other on the back about conspiratorial nonsense that doesn't make any sense. And I'd seen the same thing. And I would be one of the people getting banned from those flat earth shows, because I'd say, well, this is ridiculous. What proof have you got? And then I'd get banned. So I'd think, well, there's two discussions going on, but there's no interaction. And when there is interaction, it descends into complete chaos, complete ridicule, the most nasty abuse that you've ever seen. And that's what I got to show on this journey. I mean, it's luck, but at the end of it, we ended up with the video Flat Earth QED, the Earth is obviously unobservably flat, to justify all this and say, well, okay, now you can go back and look at the road it took to get this to be published, to get it to the point where we could present it in a nice, concise format. It literally took 30 shows of us being called liars and disgusting names, which I won't repeat. We got that for 60 hours solid. That's what we got. All played out live to an audience. And the audience interactions were included in that. Like I say, the chat feed, which is the worst part of it by far. I have no moderators. Anybody was allowed to say whatever they liked. The only moderation was the automatic Google stuff, and that got published too. So you could see the extent that Google would have hidden it had it been going out through the Google Plus channel rather than OBS. So you saw all of it. It was completely raw, about as raw as it could possibly be, and it got vicious towards the end, really vicious. And other people in this arena have suffered this for a long time, and I really, really wanted to show that. So to have a proof at the end, a proof is amazing.
I really need to point this out, because this is literally telematics that's happening live right now. Iron Realms just sent the chat in Skype showing what the figures are, and underneath it says we are. This is our biggest live yet. These are our biggest live numbers yet. And what I've just been told in the background is that all the ballers are actually listening to us right now. So the spike in the audience is predominantly from the ballers that are actually giving us all the hate. So that little spike at the end, that's them. So the people that were against us and being vitriol, we need to embrace these guys, because without them being horrible to us, without them attacking us and attacking the evidence and trying to make out that we live on a little spinning ball, they're actually listening to us right now. And without their input, we wouldn't have this proof, because my view on it originally was, oh yeah, that's Isle of Man on the left-hand side. Might be Ireland on the right, but there could be other reasons for it. It could be a bit spooky dokey, a bit trippy. But these guys shown, hey, this is actually a big proof, because they've all all piled in on us. And I just want to take a minute just to acknowledge their work, because even though it was all negative and it was all ridiculous, ultimately it's given us a cast iron case, good strong evidence that shows that there is no curvature. There is no wall of water in the way that stops us from seeing things that we can actually see. You just need a clear day, a P900, and a couple of spare batteries while you're in awe of what you're looking at around you. And you can see it for yourself. It is
Shane summed it up. Shane summed it
observably.
up nicely, because out of that dirt, out of that ridicule, came a diamond. Because if it wasn't for that ridicule, we were pushed and pushed and pushed. And Shane's reaction to that was to start from scratch, redo the composite entirely, change all the contrast levels. And what we got was a lighthouse at 51 miles, shining like a diamond. That was what all that muck generated.
And they always say that diamonds are always produced in the dirt and in the pressures. But I mean, the conversations were glorious. So what I want to do at this point is just remind folk, go onto Flat Earth Debates on YouTube. Look at any of the shows from 77 up to current day. Just pick one randomly and listen to the vitriol, the abuse. Look at the tactics of these people that are trying to suppress what's going on. Because we have got a gem. It proves that the Earth has not got a curve to it. Doesn't necessarily prove that it's flat, but it probably is flat. But just look at how we were treated and how they were behaving, and just sit back and enjoy the show, because it's just brilliant.
What that little lighthouse showed was that there was land behind the lighthouse, and there is no land behind the lighthouse that's on the Isle of Man. All this extra land that was behind the lighthouse was indeed Ireland, which was 145 miles away. And this is what the proof, this is the gem that was the lighthouse, was the final nail in the coffin. Everything else on the Isle of Man lined up. We had everything nailed down. I went back, I revisited it. I found every single town and village and nook and cranny you could think of. And when I found the lighthouse, that proved that that was the very, very tip of the Isle of Man. And everything that was behind that or further to the left of the composite had to be a different landmass, because there was no other land there. And that clearly showed and demonstrated beyond a doubt that we were seeing a distance of 145 miles on a flat plane. That's what that gem showed. That's what that lighthouse showed. And it was fantastic. It was a eureka moment for everybody, I think.
Yeah, I jumped up in the air and went, "That's proof!"
Yes, there you go.
Yeah, so I mean, ultimately it comes back to this. I mean, you only need a P900 because you need to have a lot of zoom. You need to have a crystal clear day, and you can see for miles and miles and miles. And when you put that into the context of local people in the area that realise they can see Ireland regularly, but they're not on the circuit doing the rounds like us four are, then you realise that this is common knowledge here, but not on the internet where nobody knew about it. So the overlap into real world is absolutely prominent. There's a massive misconception about how apparently big we are. We're actually very small, observably, and we can test it quite easily. However, the word needs to be out there that, hey, we're actually on somewhat small here, guys. It's not as big as what they tell us, because when you apply the geometry of what they tell us and you go to certain areas where there is a consensus locally that says you can see Ireland all the time, I'm like, really? Do you realize how important that is? So ultimately, the bottom line comes down to this. We can see for miles. If you have a P900 on a clear day, get out there and do some work, because just get on a hill. Just get yourself above that dirty air that's invisible, but we know is there because it distorts what we see. And there is no science for this, by the way, because all the science is based around living on a ball. So there is ball interpretations of it. But when you realize the Earth's flat and we have no science to explain what we're looking at, it's essentially some kind of mirage or dirty air. And I don't know what the wording for it is, but we can see it. So it's really cool.
Projection.
Huh?
Holographic projection. What they have to accept is that the item that they're looking at is not actually there. It's being projected up. The drop figure, this massive figure that is basically curved back around the Earth. Well, that figure is the figure that explains what you're seeing when you can't see it. So it's being projected up by bendy light to sit above the effective horizon that you can see, because obviously you can only see to the bulge of the Earth. Well, in reality, we see all of the Isle of Man. You know, I mean, to summarise what's actually happened.
Well, that's exactly it. Yeah. In order to see that lighthouse at all, the effective so-called refraction has to actually project the lighthouse up 663 feet so that it actually appears on the horizon again. Because not only is it hidden behind that 165-foot of bulge, it's physically 663 feet below where you're standing. So it would have to project upwards that exact amount. It's exactly like Nathan describes it precisely. That was the thing I like about this whole experience, even with all the ridicule the guys are talking about and stuff. I tried to make one. I went on the show I think once or twice, and I tried to make one presentation. Couldn't get a word in edgewise. Like couldn't even speak. Like I couldn't utter a single syllable without being talked over, shouted at, etc. So I couldn't even present the model live on the show once and get through it. I kind of did it once and got maybe halfway through it or whatever, but. The thing I enjoyed about the debate, and not only the well, I guess you would call it the vehement vitriol, the attacks, was once in a while, one of these guys would come up with some pretty good points, and that just spurred me on to be, ever more precise and say, okay, well that's actually a fairly logical supposition, so I would just incorporate that into the model and make sure I had that covered, and essentially the model developed even more so and became more and more accurate. Because at first it was like, well, it's obvious, you don't have to be that precise, but the more you're attacked, it's like, okay, I'm going to really nail down the fine details so that this thing is iron tight and it's solid. It's ironclad. Right?
We were pushed beyond our physical. Our mental capacity was pushed to the limit on this, and we had to be on our A game for every single thing, to the point now where it is concrete proof. It's undebunkable, in my opinion.
I found myself going back, in my construction career. I mean, as you develop your career, people get lazy, right? You just, you use spreadsheets for stuff, right? So I used to do all the trigonometry on a spreadsheet and stuff. But I actually found myself going back, to, early high school trigonometry days. I'm going to do this by hand, getting out a pencil and a paper and, doing, the sine tangents and try to come up with, the numbers to verify. And I enjoyed that process, right? To actually figure out the arc signs and measure, from where Anthony was standing out to the lighthouse and swing an arc across it and determine whether or not he panned the camera 33 degrees, in total to determine the extent of the Isle of Man. And I learned so much in the process about, the dimensions of the Isle of Man being, 33 miles long, 11 miles wide, and the history, and then even later on in the debate, the people from the Isle of Man, eyewitnesses that lived there, started chiming in, and I got to know a couple of those people too. They actually lived there, so I've made friends for life. Right. So for me, all that attack was entirely worth it, and that's what it's all about, right?
I really need to say one thing here in response. Chris got spoke over and over and over, so nobody could hear a word he said. But in contrast, there was a guy, and I will say his name because he's one of the better debaters. His name's the Rumpus, and he gave a 25-minute uninterrupted presentation about refraction and how it bends all around the shape of the Earth, and it was really comprehensive to some degree. And Nathan was listening to it as moderator because he's trying to listen and understand. And I came in with the objectivity that was required and necessary for Nathan to come out of his spell because he was hypnotized by the maths. I came in and says, Rompus, you've just had 25 minutes there where nobody interrupted you once, and yet you failed to mention that light also bends up. Why did you not mention this? He was only talking about light bending down, and I found that to be wholly unpersuasive and in dishonest, because light bends up, down, left, and right. And it follows the principle of it follows the trajectory of Fermat's principle. Light will deviate slightly from perfectly straight because of the atmosphere, but its effects are negligible, and that is the key word in this. The effects of refraction are negligible. So on the one hand, Chris got spoke over and stamped all over, but on the other hand, the Rumpus got 25 minutes, and he never mentioned once that light bent up. So that was a key moment for me. That was.
Well, there was 10 people on the panel, so there was 10 people on the panel in both instances, and Chris came after the Rumpus. It was like a response to Rumpus. So he said, okay, well, you've got your model and you're presenting how it should work. Now we're going to have Chris who's going to present what he wants to present, and he'll, counter that. So that was essentially when we were going to start presenting our version of the model. We'd had lots and lots of globe Earth versions of how the Isle of Man should look, lined up with Peak Finder and all sorts of other stuff. And this was sort of Chris's first opportunity. Now, bearing in mind, as Anthony said, that the globers had literally stayed pin silent. You couldn't hear a pin drop while 10 of them on the panel and this guy Rumpus gave his presentation. Exact same situation. Chris joins and he couldn't speak. They wouldn't let him. They absolutely ridiculed him, and wouldn't let him get a word in edgeways. It was ridiculous.
So
proof's
I guess
proof's in the pudding, as they say, right?
This is the beautiful thing about this observation. It stands in its own footprint by its own merit, and nobody's been able to explain it with anything that's credible in terms of what we're looking at. It looks like it's flat. It does look like it's flat, but there has to be a scientific explanation for it. And they come up with all the explanations and the diagrams and the maths, and they go, "Oh, that's it. There it is." And I'm gonna plug my own reference to this because it got to the point where they were using an argument from a presupposition, and they weren't realizing that it was a presupposition. So to drill the point home, I said, "Listen, if you've got 2 ice creams and I've got 2 ice creams, how many ice creams are there?" So all the ballers would instantly chime up and say, 4, of course, retard. And I'm like, "No, I can see you've got nothing in your hands, and you can see that I've got nothing in my hands. The answer is 0. It's a presuppositional position that you're arguing. If the Earth is a ball, this is the maths. So you accept the maths. So therefore, you've just you've just realized, or you've failed to realize, you've just accepted that we're on a ball because you've accepted the maths. But the real world is there are no ice creams because you can see my hands and I can see your hands. There are none." And that was how I made the point that it was a presuppositional argument. And they joke about it now, and it's become a bit of a joke because obviously Riley ate all the ice creams and all that kind of stuff come out afterwards. But it was making the point that they're arguing from a presupposition, and they weren't realizing it was presupposition. They were saying, no, but we do live on a ball. No, but we don't. There's the evidence that shows that we don't.
Well, that's the Eratosthenes experiment obviously shows we're on a ball. Well, yeah, sure. If you start with spherical trigonometry to do your math,
that was literally their answer. That was their answer. So I said, what you're doing is presupposing that we're on a ball, then explaining how the curve of the Earth wraps around. And I said, that's presuppositional. He said, no. And he took us to exactly the same place 2,000 years ago was his argument for it not being a presupposition.
Yeah.
But it
Well,
was
that's
glorious.
that's the part that I enjoy the most, is like to see they're grasping at straws that are 2,000 years old, and here we are in 2018, and we should be able to objectively scrutinize the information that we're being given, and when we you look at the standards. When I was active in the construction industry, we worked to standards, geodetic standards and the datum systems of, WGS 1984. And, in those days, I didn't question stuff so much, right? I wasn't actively researching the shape of the Earth. But then I, you just plug in the numbers and it spits out the right answers, and you just confirm everything to your datum points, and you call it a day. You walk away. And
make your money and go home.
Make your money, build your project. I worked on some of the biggest projects, in Canadian history, and refineries and mines. The footprints, so large that supposedly you can see them from altitude, right? And I find that interesting that I never ever questioned in 20 years of construction. I never questioned why we apply a flattening factor of 298.25722 to this so-called sphere, and then to bring it down to an ellipsoid, and we flatten the entire thing by, well, that's 300%, right? 300, a factor of 300, 1 over 300.
Just that alone's a great thing to hear, because so many times I hear, well, they can't build buildings without accounting for the curvature. Come on, flatter.
Yeah, no, there's a flattening factor. You go to WGS 1984, the geodetic coordinate system, and there's a flattening factor that you apply to your datum points to bring everything back down, and then it's basically projected on the ellipsoid, which is just a dome. Effectively, it's a dome over a flat map, right? Right, and then all the GPS, GPS should actually stand for gravitational positioning system, because it's not actually geodetics. It's geocentric gravitational constant is actually what WGS 1984 stands for. It's a geocentric gravitational constant. So essentially, you flattened everything, and then that's assigned to a mean center point of so-called gravitational mass, and then that is actually a point in time. It's actually allocated to the epoch of 2005 at 12 noon 2005 in Greenwich, England. This is where the center of mass was.
Right.
And we survey everything to that point, like everything. So it's a complete work of fiction. It's actually not tied to the ground in any way, shape, or form. It's tied to a point in time of this so-called moving object that they call the ball, the sphere, the globe, right? Right.
Well, man, we are getting so close to the end here. Everybody, I want to give everybody a minute to kind of plug any and everything you'd like to, upcoming appearances, and especially where people can find the Flat Earth QED video that is the ultimate actual Flat Earth proof that we've all waited on.
Yeah, I'll start just first. Basically, this debate is still live. We're still doing it. We'll be on this afternoon with Nathan on the Flat Earth debate, and the slogan is keeping up to date with the Flat Earth debate. But it'll be on again this afternoon. It'll be on again for the next few days because this is going to run for a while. And I'll be there. You can find me on YouTube just by searching the name Sleeping Warrior, and then you'll find my channel. There's loads of videos up that I've done, so you'll find me by Sleeping Warrior. I'll pass you to Nath. Come on, Nath.
Yeah, so the Flat Earth debate is just called that, Flat Earth Debate, and that's on my channel, Nathan Oakley 1980, and it currently runs live on my secondary channel, which is just called Nathan Oakley. But to be honest, ignore all of that. That isn't important. Go to Nathan Oakley 1980 and watch the video called Flat Earth QED. The Earth is obviously and observably flat. That's the video to watch. So Flat Earth, QED, Nathan Oakley 1980 channel. That's definitely the video to watch. It's about an hour. It's very digestible, easy format to take in.
Ranty?
Ranty, yeah. If you want to search for my channel's Ranty with an exclamation mark at the end of it. It's actually the third channel that I've had up. The previous two were taken down by YouTube. So I think there's only maybe 20 or 30 videos on there. Other ones, my old channels used to have an awful lot more. Yeah, I'm hoping to get back to doing some research this year. So stay tuned and look for some more Flat Earth proof on that particular channel, Ranty with an exclamation mark. And now for Chris.
Yeah, I don't have anything really to plug. I just let the audience know that I'll be busy, reading Nicholas Copernicus of Torrens 6 books on the revolution of the heavenly bodies and spheres, and that's where you'll find me buried in that stuff and coming up with hopefully some more useful information, and we'll see you all in the future.
Just one last thing to add is I've been truly, truly humbled working with Chris, Anthony and Shane. It's been an absolutely amazing journey and truly humbling for me, so thank you to those guys.
And thank all of you guys for being here. You guys have shown us some amazing stuff this morning. We're going to have you on later this afternoon on our Flat Earth Friday show on the YouTube channel, Iron Rim Media. So definitely that will help with all these visual aids we weren't able to provide here. But we were going to knock all that out with the links and the description for the show here. So you'll be able to get an idea of all these amazing images and the documentation. My goodness.
I guess maybe to the audience, they could check out fecore.org and see what we're going to next. Yeah. Thanks very much.
Well, as always, thank you all, Josh. Thank you, sir. I love you.
Thank you all. I love you too. Another fabulous morning. Thank you. Thanks out there in chat. We'll see you right back here next week. Have a good rest of your day. A great weekend. Be well.
Break clear of the fear.